Welcome to the Buck Stops here, the official audio show of Notinhalloffame.com, and I'm your host, Kirk Buchner, the owner and the operator of Notinhalloffame.com, and the sister sites, the Fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame and the Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which will be front and center, as I've got a mea culpa. Last week, Evan Nolan, my regular co-host, I announced the Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame finalists. I missed one. I missed a big one. And we talked about that, and that's going to open up the program. We also looked at Tony La Russa. It's a Hall of Famer who's now back. Baseball Hall of Famer, and some people have had some interesting takes on that. Evan's got a pretty good comment on that. But the main event is something that we worked on really hard at NotInHallOfFame.com. You know, when you talk about Halls of Fame, what do? You want to build one, and we did. But we want to talk about the ones that already exist. We wanted to see if we can do it better, because we criticize all the time what the various halls do, how they get together, so, let's just see if we can sort of do that. And that's what we did. We put together a group of like-minded individuals, and we came up with a committee. It's our mock football committee, first one we've ever done, and it went really, really well. And it was a group of about 10 of us, 8 of us who were able to be on the Zoom call, looking at who should be the semifinalist for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, paring down from the 130 preliminary group. We enjoyed this very much. Evan and I, obviously we were part of that call, and we're just sort of like going to give a little bit of a breakdown of what transpired and how we came up with it. Because one thing that we promise that we're going to do with our little mock halls, we're going to be transparent. A hell of a lot more than the actual halls, that's for damn sure. Without further ado, let's bring in Evan. Mr. Nolan, I'd say long time no talk, but it seems that's not the case anymore.
No, it's weird now that I've seen you. I can't believe that we're not talking face to face again after all this time. It was I have to say you sell yourself short. You're much better looking than where did you actually describe yourself?
Fat Ricky Schroeder.
Yeah, I don't think that does you justice. You're a much better looking man than that. Ricky Schroeder wishes he was as good looking as you are.
I doubt that, but I think he might wish lately that he's not in the news as much as he used to be. That might be more accurate. I think the last time he was in the news was for domestic violence, I believe, which is a great way to start off the Hall of Fame show, episode 43. But I have to admit here, Evan, I screwed up. As the owner, operator of the Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a big thing that we talked about last week, a giant error that I made was brought to my attention in the calculations as to who should have advanced to the finals. So there was someone who should have been there. Actually, they finished first. I somehow missed a digit, or I didn't look. I can't say I was drinking because I haven't had a drink all month. I can say possibly that a lot of brain cells have been lost due to copious amounts of drinking I've done in the past. But I was not drunk when I made this error. So we did the show last week where we announced who the finalists were going to be for the Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is now up, by the way. I just have to do a bit of a write-up. And you can all check that out. Just go to notinhalloffame.com, just scroll down a little bit, and there'll be some icons where it says you can vote for the Fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame, the Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This is for the class of 2020. Vote. There's now 16 nominees for the Rock Hall, where there was 15 before. So I apologize to Valerie Brown.
Right?
Pardon me?
I said Sing Street, right?
No, it was not Sing Street. It was definitely not Sing Street. It is.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
It is the triumvirate of Valerie Brown, Melody Valentine, and Josie McCoy. They were the leading vote getters. I swear.
I was wondering about that.
Well, yeah, I screwed up. And when I sent this off all to Ted, the greatest webmaster in all of Winnipeg, I will say in all of the world, he said, basically, what the hell? Where's Josie? I said, what do you mean? They had the most votes. Oops. This was not me stepping on the using my patriarchal privilege. This was not me sort of looking at... I don't know, I got really nothing else here. Just, I guess the patriarchal thing sort of works here. This is not an anti-70s bias because there are 70s acts in this already. This was just a colossal oversight and a clerical error. And to borrow from our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, when he got caught, or when it was unveiled that he was in blackface and brownface many, many times, said, and he did say this, I think this is something that we all as Canadians can learn from. I don't know how this quite applies, but perhaps this is all something that all as commissioners can learn from, and I'm sorry.
Wow.
Yes.
I always think it's a good idea to tie yourself back to someone apologizing for blackface whenever you can. It always goes well. Well, that makes sense. I was shocked last week when Josie and the Pussycats weren't up. Because, it makes a lot of sense. So I'm glad to see they're there. I fully expect that they'll be in, and I'm sure this is part of some secret campaign of yours to get Josie in. So I'd still Gem and Holograms didn't make it over Leather Tuscadero, but Josie and Pussycats is a welcome addition to the final 16 now.
It is a 16. So, I did not think it would be fair to cut out the individual who was 15th, or now 16th rather. So this is sort of
we already announced it, so
right. It's already announced,
that makes sense.
So it's all there, and I don't want to hurt the feelings of a fictitious person who doesn't exist.
It's karma, man. You don't want to hurt the feelings of anyone, right?
No, I definitely do not. I want to sort of get in front of this potential scandal that would have rocked the hall to its core. I was thinking about tendering my resignation, but then I didn't really know who to tender it to. I guess to you.
If elected, I will not serve. If nominated, I will not run. You are the commissioner, sir. I will say though, if there's one person who I think that you would probably have offended in this, is Jeff O'Connell of the Baseball Writers Association of America.
Okay.
How's that for my transition?
I like it.
So Jack O'Connell today is disturbed. Absolutely and utterly disturbed by what's going on in baseball. Do you know what that thing was? What happened in baseball?
I believe it has something to do with your adopted or current hometown.
Yeah, my long-term hometown, I guess, from now on. Not where I'm from, but where I'm going to be living here. Mm-hmm. Tony La Russa, who was fired by the White Sox in one of their great decisions of all time, 34 years ago, mm-hmm. has come back out of retirement. He retired in 2011, I believe. Is that right?
That sounds right.
Have he retired?
I'll look that up while you're doing this.
But I believe he retired in 2011. He was elected to the Hall of Fame along with Joe Torre and Bobby Cox in the first class that showed me that they were only going to punish players for the steroids era. Mm-hmm. La Russa is 76 years old and was named the best friend of Jerry Reinsdorf, who didn't have a job, and became the manager of the very young and exciting and opinionated Chicago White Sox today, which is not the most popular move here in Chicago. But it's even less popular for Jack O'Connell, who said, and I quote, if you're about whether or not whether it's a surprise committee members when he was selected the Hall of Fame that Tony La Russa was coming back, he said, I quote, if you're asking me if that's disturbing, my answer is yes. We were all assuming his career was finished, and the body of work was complete. Now, let me just say one thing about baseball. Baseball hates itself so very much.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball is a great sport that does whatever it can to destroy itself. They were actually talking. There was a time when Tommy Lasorda, after he had been elected Baseball Hall of Fame, was thinking of coming back. And one of the people on that committee who elected him was Yogi Berra. And Berra actually called Lasorda up, said, "You're done, you're retired, you're in the Hall, you can't go back." And Lasorda ended up not. Now, I don't know how much that had to do with it. But just the idea that because it was in the Hall of Fame, they can't go back and do something is insane. I remember when Jim Palmer was elected the Baseball Hall of Fame, he was hinting at making a comeback and trying to get back into baseball. And there was like all these people. I remember Don Sutton was like elected at the same time he was like up in arms about the idea that he tried to make a comeback after making the Hall of Fame. It's dumb, right? Like Mario Lemieux was in the Hall of Fame, and then came back and played hockey. And you know what happened to hockey? Expanded south. But other than that, nothing.
Well,
everything was fine.
Lemieux wasn't the only one to do that. He's one of three.
Right, but my point is, hockey did not fall apart because Mario Lemieux played more hockey. We just got to see Mario Lemieux play more hockey.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if I'm going to be nearly as excited to watch Tony La Russa, crotchety Tony La Russa, manage more baseball games. I will be interested to see how some of these players deal with Tony La Russa in the locker room. But just the idea that he can't come back after he's been elected Hall of Fame because they thought his career was complete. Like, what's going to happen? Tony La Russa comes out and goes like 60 and 102, presuming we have a full 162-game season next year. Baseball writers are like, that negates the other 35 years of your career. Like, what are we doing? What are we talking about? I don't think this is a good move for the White Sox, but Tony La Russa is still third all-time in wins. He's got 4 championships. Like, again, he's a major part of the steroid era. He was the manager of Mark McGwire and Jose Canseco. But nothing he does in this thing is going to make any difference as to whether or not he was a Hall of Famer. No. And the very idea that Jack O'Connell is disturbed by the fact that Jerry Reinsdorf decided he wanted to hire his friend and not the Hispanic coach who brought his team to the playoffs for the first time in years. As to have him as a manager, the dude's a billionaire. He owns the team. If he wants to completely alienate his fan base and neuter his general manager, I guess that's his prerogative, right? But that has nothing to do with Jack O'Connell. And baseball needs to stop hating itself.
It has to.
It just does. Every time there's something cool, they figure out a way to make it awful. And again, that this is necessarily cool. But, like, they have spent most of our lives, right, fighting the players to the point where none of us, Mookie Betts just won his second championship and should be the face of baseball only because Mike Trout has the personality of a wet paper bag, as far as I can tell. Mike Trout should be the guy, but he has no personality. So you have to go to the guy who has personality, Mookie Betts. Mookie Betts should be the face of baseball. Right after the World Series, what happened? What was the major story after the Dodgers won the World Series?
Justin Turner.
Mm-hmm. Like they just had the Dodgers won their first championship since the aforementioned Tommy Lasorda in 1980 and Kirk Gibson's home run, right? Which I always, in my head, still think World Series was actually in Game 1. But regardless. But it's the first time in 32 years the city of Los Angeles has got 2 of the champions at the same time. It's not insane the Rams might be the third, right? But the first story afterwards is the fact they couldn't keep Justin Turner off the GD Field or the fact they couldn't figure out that Justin Turner had tested positive until the second inning of the Game 6 of the World Series.
Yeah, how the hell does that happen? Like, okay, we're still waiting on your test, but yeah, go ahead. You'll be fine. I guess. I don't understand how that's even possible for that shit show to happen. The most appropriate thing that happened was Rob Manfred getting booed out of that cavernous building, and him completely shook. And it's the perfect look on him. It looked good. Loved it. Can't boo Goodell anymore because he just rolls with it. I mean, he figured that out. Just like when he did hashtag boo the commish. He just said, okay, you know what? I'm going to embrace this shit. And, good on him. And then it kind of worked on me because it sure as hell isn't as fun anymore. But Rob Manfred, you haven't figured that out, and you won't.
Yeah. And you can't, every time we boo Gary Bettman, he lives another 4 years.
Mm.
So that made the lights in the booze at this point. So anyway, just another stupid thing out of a Hall of Fame that of a sport that just really, really wants to self-destruct.
It's like HAL 2000 becoming self-aware, just really not knowing what it should do. Should it destroy humanity? Should it not? I don't know. I mean, there's a sci-fi thing. I'm probably not using the right robot here. I'm trying to think of who the right one is. I'll think of it right when we're done. But that's what baseball is. It's becoming self-aware, and it doesn't know whether it hates itself or it hates the people who created it, and it wants to destroy itself or just live on another day. Not sure. Maybe that's something I could write. I've got the time. I think I could run with that. And can I segue from that too? If any manager sort of really hurt themselves, it's got to be Kevin Cash. Just, you're looking at data a little bit too much, guy. Maybe a lot too much. Now that decision was really bad. But here's what I will say in defense of Kevin Cash. Mm-hmm.
The Tampa Bay Rays have the 28th highest payroll in baseball. Their payroll is 1/3 that of the Dodgers, and they brought them to Game 6 World Series. Now, that was a decision which is indefensible in many ways, anyone who's really ever watched baseball.
Mm-hmm.
But he brought that team there, which they have absolutely no business being there. The Pittsburgh Pirates spend more on their salaries than the Rays do. And Pittsburgh Pirates haven't been good since Sid Bream stole balls.
Sid Bream, oh my God.
He has to get credit for the slowest charge around third base of all time, and somehow beat Barry Bonds' throw home. But the fact that they even got there, and maybe it said something, but no, I think that decision on its own seemed awful. No, I think the bigger issue is, did they take him out? They put him one of their worst relievers afterwards. I think that was the even bigger issue.
Sure. No, there's a YouTube channel I follow a lot, John Boy Media. And they did the perfect breakdown.
Yeah, I know him.
Yeah, and it's just it's just a great site or just great YouTube channel for anyone who's really into baseball and just analyzes certain plays and turning points, and it's just brilliant. And the way he brought it out, it was okay, so here we've got Kevin Cash, who's counting on a unique form of analytics and just different things, just almost like pitching by committee. And he's a firm believer of once someone has seen you 2 times, they're going to figure you out. But then they did I just blanked on Blake Snell. On how he sort of performs analytically on the third go-around. And it's actually better than a second. Now, who bats first? Mookie Betts. Betts is actually worse on his third go-around on seeing a pitcher in a game. And he broke that down for not just this year, but the year before, too. Just to sort of like paint that picture. Also, he's taking out a lefty for a righty, which is far more favorable to Betts. And Anderson gave up a run in the last 6 games.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They took out their best pitcher for one of their worst relievers, at least recently.
It's like if, I don't know, who painted the Mona Lisa?
Da Vinci?
Da Vinci, thank you. Sometimes I get my Renaissance painters all mixed up. So Da Vinci, and he's got that, he's perfect. He's thinking, you know what, though? If this is great. And he's second-guessing himself, third-guessing himself. Okay, I know she doesn't have a unibrow, but let's say I just give a real thick one right here. That's what this was to me.
Wow.
Sometimes, I mean, if you're going to go completely all analytical, then go all analytical. You trusted yourself on one analytical hunch that didn't actually play out in this situation.
Right. And it went against what everyone's eyes were seeing at the same time.
Absolutely. You run the hot hand. And who was it who just got a hit before him? I forget. But it wasn't like it was a powerful single.
Right.
But that's my vents. Mookie Betts, you already were one of my top 10 favorite players before. You're now like right up there. I just absolutely love watching you play. Everything you do is entertaining. Congratulations to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Congratulations to baseball for somehow making this entertaining World Series. Because I sure as hell don't know how they managed to do it.
And then destroying it right afterwards.
Absolutely.
So, anyway, I have a thing we want to talk about this week. Should we just run quickly through
yes.
a couple of deaths here? Because I don't think there's anyone in particularly big, but I just want to get through them quickly so we can move on to what we actually want to talk about. Mm-hmm. First of all, someone passed away today that I just do want to take a little bit of time on. So there are actually a couple who passed away from hockey. One was the dressing room attendant for the Edmonton Oilers, Joey Moss, who had Down syndrome and actually died of relations to dementia. But put it this way, he's the Edmonton clubhouse attendant or dressing room attendant, and he's the only one in the entire NHL I know.
I know who he is,
because everyone thought... Sorry?
No, I know who that was. When you mentioned this before, I didn't know who that was. But, he's if I remember right, he's even been in a national commercial with Wayne Gretzky in Canada.
Yeah, I believe that is true. Yep. So he was in that position for over 30 years. But he passed away at the age of 57 earlier this week.
And he had dementia, too?
A whole bunch. Yeah, he died of dementia, actually. He had, but early... Like, there are tributes coming in from all over the league, from Gretzky and all sorts of other people for Joey Moss. Again, not often I mentioned locker room attendance at all, but that was a big loss for hockey. And another one happened today from my hometown. Mm-hmm. Travis Roy passed away. I don't know if you remember Travis Roy's story.
I don't. I just learned about it today on reading about it on ESPN.
Yeah, so Travis Roy was a kid from Maine who got a scholarship to play hockey at DU. And 11 seconds into his first shift, he got hit into the boards and was paralyzed. About 25 years ago. I think it was 25 years ago earlier this year. I think it was February of 95, somewhere around there. And there was a complete outpouring of, oh my God, what's going on? And he took that situation and made himself into one of the biggest philanthropists and people doing the great work for the next 25 years. I mean, just everybody loved. He was raising money for everything, the Travis Roy Foundation, to help spinal cord injury survivors. Just everybody. John Buchner, who's known him since he was a kid, had a whole bunch of stuff on him today. And just one of the truly inspiring, taking lemons and, not just making lemonade, I don't even know. Whatever the greatest thing is you can make with lemons. Truly inspiring stories. He passed away, unfortunately, at the age of 35 today, due to complications from being a quadriplegic. So, if you guys have time, go back. There's a great ESPN story on him. There's also a great Sports Illustrated article. So, anyway, so I just wanted to bring him up because he was a big deal, particularly in Boston. All of the Boston area is very, very sad tonight. So, just another couple of people who we should probably talk about. We had a couple of country singers. Jerry Jeff Walker, who wrote the song Mr. Bojangles. Leading singer in the outlaw country music, passed away at the age of 78. He wrote tons and tons. He's one of those guys who wrote tons and tons of music. I mean, the Mr. Bojangles is his most famous song. But, he's a very big name in country music. Not a member of Country Hall, but somebody who probably would have some consideration. And then yesterday, Billy Joe Shaver passed away as well, another member of the outlaw country movement. Are you familiar with him at all?
Not very, no.
Just another guy. There's a nice tribute from Springsteen about him, actually. But another one of those guys. Actually, was also in what was the name of that movie? The Apostle with Robert Duvall.
Oh, okay.
You remember that movie?
Yeah, I do.
He also was in, I think, Secondhand Lions. I think he was in as well, if I'm remembering. But just another couple of people on the fringes of consideration for the Country Hall who passed away. We had a member of the NCAA Football Hall of Fame, W.C. Gordon, passed away at the age of 90. He was the coach of Jackson State for many years. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you saw that. The Black Collegiate Hall of Fame announced their finalists. Did you see that earlier?
No, I missed that completely. I'll have to do a write-up on that. When did they do that?
I think it was yesterday. There are 25 names on there, including Ben Coates and Nate Newton and Winston Hill and a few other decent names. I was like, I know who that person is.
Yeah, I'll have to get on that. University of Nevada just did their athletic one featuring Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, that makes sense. So W.C. Gordon passed away. Like I said, he was a coach at Jackson State for many years. And he was just as such, he died of complications from old age at the age of 90. Do you want to talk about Tracy Smothers at all?
Yeah, a little bit. Tracy Smothers, former pro wrestler. One of those workers. He had been everywhere. Not really a top of the card guy. Although he was in a smaller promotion in the early to mid '90s called Smoky Mountain Wrestling, where he was the champion there. From the feedback that a lot of the other wrestlers put out when they were talking about him, it was all super positive. Just one of those guys that just made everyone smile. One of the last guys too. I think he actually wrestled a bear.
Wow.
Yeah. So former champion, and Smoky Mountain. I think he was a tag champion when WCW was still the NWA, I believe. I'm not quite sure on that. And he had a few months in the WWE with a name where he was never going to get over. They called him Freddie Joe Floyd, and basically made him a hillbilly from Oklahoma. I mean, he was a Southern guy anyway. So but if you're going to be called Freddie Joe Floyd, you're probably not going to headline against The Rock.
Yeah, probably not.
He did have this one weird gimmick at the end when he was in Extreme Championship Wrestling. And he pretended that he was Italian, so he was billed from Nashville, Italy. Which, hey, why not?
Why not? Exactly. So, so he passed away at age 58 from lymphoma earlier this week. And just two more. We had a couple of folks at NFL. We had a 10-year player, Bob Whitlow, who was a center on the Redskins, the Lions for 4 years, Falcons, played 100 games in NFL, actually qualified for the 1960 Olympics for the U.S. as a shot putter, and decided not to go to the Olympics and play football instead. But he passed away at the age of 84. And probably the bigger name that passed away, Jimmy Orr. Do you remember Jimmy Orr?
I don't.
He was a wide receiver on the Super Bowl champion Baltimore Colts, Super Bowl V, two-time Pro Bowler, first-team All-Pro in 65, two-time second-team All-Pro in 58, 59, and the 1958 NFL Rookie of the Year. He's probably never, ever going to get into the Hall. There's a different era back then. But he ended up with 400 career receptions, just under 8,000 yards.
It's pretty good.
66 receiving TDs. For back then, but 66 receiving TDs. He still holds a rookie record for Steelers. He had 3 touchdowns, 205 yards receiving in a game against the Chicago Cardinals, which is still the rookie record for Steelers receivers. The Steelers have had some receivers, but he passed away at the age of 85. So.
And what about the Beige Mistress? Has she been quiet? Will we be 2 weeks?
No.
Oh.
No, the Beige Mistress. The Beige Mistress caused some mayhem. She unfortunately took Christian Bereb from the 2000 Sydney Olympic Games bronze medalist. He's a Hungarian sprint canoer.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, as for those who are new to the pod, we may have some come this week. The Beige Mistress is someone that I've discovered, and when we make sure we go through everyone who might be in a Hall of Fame or Hall of Fame consideration, I noticed that there's a lot of Hungarian athletes who passed away, and then for like 19 straight weeks for the Hungarian Olympic athlete who passed away. She was quiet last week, and we don't want to call her the Black Widow. It just became the Beige Mistress. But she strikes again. It's amazing how many Hungarian Olympic athletes have passed away in 2020.
It's a conspiracy. It's some post-East Bloc, Soviet Bloc conspiracy, but this is an athlete from 2000, so I think he found out about it.
He might have. Yeah, it was a motorcycle accident. That seems very KGB.
Yeah. Did they check the brake lines?
Yeah, I don't know. Or if not the KGB, at least the Stasi, right? That was the East German guys. I can't remember what the Hungarian guys were. So, anyways, yeah. So he was one of the best ones. I mean, he was so 2-time silver medalist and world champions, 2-time bronze medalist world champions, championships in bronze in Sydney Games. So he was only 43 when he passed. So there we go. That's the death roll. Now let's go to the real reason anybody's listening to us. It's one of the coolest things I think we've ever done.
I loved it. That was for my first ever Zoom meeting. It's going to be hard to top. So what Evan and I no, serious. I loved it. It was great. And no one masturbated on camera. So that was even better.
Nobody masturbated on camera that you could see.
That's true. That's true.
Most of us were sitting down. So
what we did is we talked about putting together mock committees. We've been thinking about this for a while, and we finally did it. So so this was one where we put together a group of people, like-minded individuals, I like to say, people who are really interested in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And we took the preliminary list of candidates, and we pared them down to 25. So I guess we should just say who was on this committee. There was 8 of us on the Zoom call, but 10 people who participated. Hopefully we're going to have some more in the future. And I just want to give off their Twitter handles so that way people can follow them if they have an interest in doing this. There will be a write-up on the site regarding how we sort of came through with this, but it's kind of a little antiseptic. I just sort of went to the meat and potatoes, like what we did for round A, round B, round C, etc. But I'll just read off who was there. So obviously myself, Not Hall of Fame, at Not Hall of Fame. Yourself, Secondhand Burrito, the best Twitter handle I think in all of us.
Still mine, yeah. I've had it for years. I just the short version. That's why it's that. Is there was an in joke of something that nobody wanted, which was a secondhand burrito, and I figured when I went online and was posting my opinions on Twitter, nobody would want that either. So that's why I picked it.
Why not? We had Glenn Pulowski, a triathlete from Buffalo, big Bills fan. You can follow him at Kona Dreams, but Dreams with 6 S's. I should have asked him. I guess there was I guess there was Kona Dreams with 5 S's. Someone must have that with 4.
That seems like a different version of the people who have the 17 numbers after their name. I didn't notice that. That's pretty funny.
Well, yeah. When I was putting that up there, it's because it's like, huh. Because I wanted to make sure that my eyes weren't playing with me. I don't want to miss an S because I'm putting a hyperlink so that people can just follow them too. Vance Meek, big Bengals fan who's done a couple blogs on his fandom of the Bengals. He's been a guest on the show. He didn't have the same problem. So it's just at Vance Meek. Vance was able to put in his votes, but he was not able to join us due to a late commitment at work. Jack Silverstein from Chicago, from where you are at, sports historian and writer. You can follow him at Read Jack. And I'm really happy he was part of that. He brought a lot of unique points to the table.
He did.
David Whitlock, a blogger and commentator, LHD _on_sports. And he's got his own site too, LHD-on-sports.com.
Who honestly, we'll go into it, but I don't know who the Broncos guy is speaking in their room. Whoever it is, they need to replace him with Dave. No, it's Tom. I'm sorry, it was Tom.
That's a different one. You're giving Dave a different credit.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. Dave, you were great too. I'm sorry, but let Tom. Go
ahead. Ted Crockett. You can follow him at Ted Crockett's LLL. I could see there being more than one Ted Crockett. Well, you'd have to, So Ted is a big enthusiast like us and regarding all sports halls and former U.S. veteran. So we salute you, sir. Thomas Hall.
Yep, there we go.
Yeah, so and you can follow him at Thomas Hall, NFL. Hall, what do you call him, Tom? Tom follows the Broncos religiously and the host of his own show, Convincing Numbers, and a devotee of football analytics. And he also contributes to Mile High Huddle. Yeah.
Dave was also great, but like I said, Tom... I don't know who the person is for the Broncos, but nobody could be better than Tom was with one of the people who ended up in our top 25, who definitely came from the furthest away, and almost all on the strength that Tom's already for.
Absolutely. One gentleman, Paul Lawrence, who was not able to join us, and if this doesn't tell you that that he loves the Pro Football Hall of Fame conversation, his handle is ProFHOF Canton F.
That's big on the nose.
And our youngest and probably the most passionate regular guest, Vinny Lospinuso, everyone's favorite Hofstra College student and future journalist and broadcaster. If you don't believe that, it's on his Twitter handle, Vin Lospinuso 91. So this was our group. And as mentioned, Vance and Paul were not able to join us. I'm sure that they will be able to do so in the future. And so I called Evan the day before, because we were trying to figure out what was the best way to sort of go about this. And I think we came up with something that I think it worked, where we just eliminated everyone who was unanimous and everyone who didn't get a vote at all. And then we kind of worked our way to the middle, kind of like a sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you think that worked? I think that worked pretty good.
Yeah, I think it worked pretty well. So, first of all, just about the group in general, one of the really cool things about it is each one of us is a fan of a different team, right?
True.
So, I mean, you're a Saints fan.
Yep.
I'm a Patriots fan. You're Broncos, Lions, Bears.
Oh, my.
Yes. Yeah, well, the Bengals guy wasn't there to complete that, I guess. Bills. I know I'm leaving a couple teams out. But we're a Dolphins fan there too, right?
And Vinny is actually a free agent, which makes him the most objective out of all of us.
Yeah. But it was really cool having all the different perspectives. So there wasn't like a whole bunch of Patriots fans telling us all, and I was a Patriots fan, and all of us saying how Asante Samuel needed to be in the Hall of Fame. Like it was great to have different perspectives and things like that, and it was really good to see how calm the group was. I was expecting there to be more drag out internet type fights, and they just didn't exist. It was really, really cool to see that. The people were respectful generally of other people's points, and we could disagree calmly without going at each other, which was also pretty cool.
I think that sometimes we forget just in this weird social media age, because everyone can sort of be a keyboard warrior. And as I sort of look, because everyone sort of met here on this group, I think with the exception of you and I, who just sort of connected on the site actually when you found it. But the rest of us were all sort of meeting over Twitter. And I think if there was anyone who would have been a little cantankerous, I don't think I would have invited them. Actually, there was one person that I had in mind, and then I sort of looked at their whole feed and yeah, maybe not. Which is kind of a shame because I think they might have had something really interesting to bring to the table. But, if we're just going to get all volatile, then, no one's listening. And then if no one's listening, then no one's learning.
Right, exactly right. And I feel like I learned a ton in this process. A ton in this process. So anyway, I took us on a tangent there. So what you were saying before was anyone who got no votes, because there are 130 names, and we were not sitting there to go through 130 names. Right. We did not need to spend a whole bunch of time on Alan Rawson. There's just no point, right? Right. So we eliminated anyone who had nothing, and then anyone we decided who was unanimous, we just automatically put forward into our 25. Yeah,
and I think rather than sort of go through the ones who didn't get any votes, just a quick mention of who was unanimous. Essentially, if Evan and I don't mention that person at all, just assume they got no votes. Safe to say?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So 4 people.
Yeah. I do not feel like listing 65 names. So there's no point.
No. So 4 people who got unanimous. Wouldn't have been the 4 people I would have thought. 2 of them, yes. 3 yes. The 4th, a slight surprise to me. Quarterback Peyton Manning. Wide receiver Calvin Johnson. Offensive line Alan Faneca. Defensive back Charles Woodson. Calvin Johnson, to me, was a slight surprise as a unanimous. To me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Johnson had to claim as being the best, if not the best offensive player overall, but the best wide receiver in the league for several years there. Mm-hmm. And I know his career is short, and he's actually the one who taught us how you actually complete a catch, unfortunately, in the NFL.
Oh, God.
Still one of the dumbest calls I've ever seen in my life. But yeah, he's by far, I mean, we could talk about that Hall of Fame standard metric that the Pro Football Reference came up with, I think even last year. Mm-hmm. But on that reference, Peyton Manning, the average Hall of Famer is 100 on their system. Peyton Manning is a 258.
Yes.
Faneca is a 139.5, and Charles Woodson's a 125.03. Like, those are three people who were not surprising. But I guess you're right with all the wide receivers out there. It was a little surprising that all of us had Calvin Johnson. Although, I mean, with 25 slots, you'd think, I mean, Calvin Johnson's going to be one of the 25 best on any of these lists. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it wasn't so much that it was Calvin Johnson to me that was the slight surprise. It's just that there wasn't more. So I guess if I sort of look at these, and so if I think I look at these four, and it's so weird to say Calvin Johnson's the weakest of any group in anything. It just seems so wrong.
He is Megatron.
Oh my god! I just love that. He was Megatron playing with a bunch of bumblebees.
Yeah.
Actually, Bumblebee always got a lot. Bumblebee got a lot of play. Who would have been who's a shitty Decepticon?
Starscream.
Well, Starscream was a great fighter. He just was a lousy leader.
But if I could lead the Decepticons Megatron, we'd all do well.
It wasn't the best. Sorry.
Yeah. That actually wasn't bad. It's hard not to do a bad impression of Starscream because he was the worst. I don't know. I can't even think of. I think mostly of the Autobots. In particular, did you ever see the original Transformers TV show or the movie? I mean,
the movie. Yeah. Where they wiped out virtually half the characters I grew up with in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah. The movie starts with Megatron basically, for lack of a better term, mafia style executing Ironhead on his ship. Ironhead's like on the ground and just is like talking to him, and he has the gun on his arm and just shoots Ironhead in that head when it's on his back and kills him. And you're like I was 7 when this came out, and I'm like, wait, what just happened?
This got dark really quick.
Did he just kill him? So yeah, that was a tough movie. But anyway, we're way off. We're way off here. So Megatron, we're surprised, but clearly deserved to be on the list of 25 that we came up with.
So yeah, and also the other interesting thing here too. That's 3 first ballot out of these 4.
Yep. And somebody who we both think should have been in like 5 years ago.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see what happens. So then step 2, we just decided to look at almost unanimous. So there was 4 people who got all but 1 vote. Torrey Holt, Tony Baselli, Leroy Butler, John Lynch. We just put them all through. Just did a quick discussion. Like, is there really anything that needs to be said more? Is there anyone who objects to these 4 not being part of the greatest 25? No one did. We moved on.
Yep. So now we're up to 8.
Right. And then we sort of went to the bottom part of the sandwich. The people only got 1 vote. So these ones I will mention them all, because there's quite a few, and we'll only really touch on a few of them, because I think there is, as you sort of alluded to, we've got one big one out of this group that I don't want to say shot out of nowhere and isn't deserving, but that is not a name that I thought that we were going to be doing a lot of, and it certainly came to fruition. So we had quarterback Steve McNair, running back Steven Jackson, Eddie George, Priest Holmes, Eric Metcalf, Warwick Dunn, fullback Lorenzo Neal, wide receivers Jimmy Smith, Donald Driver, Rod Smith, tight end Bedden Coates, offensive lineman Willie Anderson, Kent Hull, Olin Krutz, defensive lineman / defensive end Ray Childress, Casey Hampton, Justin Tuck, former semifinalists Simeon Rice, Leslie O'Neill, John Abraham, Cornelius Bennett, Teddy Bruschi, why do I keep doing that? Joey Porter, London Fletcher, Bennett, Bruschi, Porter, Fletcher, all linebackers. Defensive backs, Asante Samuel, Charles Tillman, Troy Vincent, kick returner Mel Gray, punter Reggie Roby.
You missed Rodney Harrison.
Oh, sorry
He was
about
on
that.
here as well.
Yes. Rodney Harrison.
Yeah. So that's a fourth one. Yeah. So we had a longer debate about this. We had a pretty good one. Essentially, what you said was if anyone really had someone they wanted to press and really talk about here, that would be the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some pretty interesting discussions on several of them.
Yes.
Others we had almost none on, but the ones who advanced out of here were very interesting to me. They were not the ones I necessarily was expecting.
No, me either. As mentioned, Tom Hall, I hope you're listening. You missed a calling as a lawyer. I really believe that. You convinced us and made it the ultimate pitch for Tom Nolan, former Broncos center, and just using logic and real basic analytics. This was the man under center on a line that produced a lot of one-and-done running backs. Mm-hmm. And I put a link to
Orlando Scary.
Orlando Scary, yes.
I'm trying to think of some of them.
Well, I put a link to the on the article that we're writing to something that he actually wrote for Broncos Wire or Mile High Huddle. Sorry, why do I keep adding a wire to like everything? I just say Saints Wire, Patriots Wire. A lot of them are wires, but this one he did for Mile High Huddle, which everyone can sort of read, and it just summed up what he actually said to all of us, and it put it into perspective that a lot of us hadn't really considered. And we said that with all the people who had only the one vote, we were going to advance 3 players to the next round. That round being those who got 2 votes. And Nolan was one of them.
Yep. Yeah, he made a very convincing argument. So Nolan, for me, when I went through this, just so you know my process of getting here, and I don't know how yours went, but I took the 130, and then I cut it to 100, and then I went through and cut it to 80 to 60 to 50, 40, 35, 30, and then final 25. Nolan ended up being 28th on my list. So it was somebody who was there, but he was just, I decided to, because we had one other center on here, or we had multiple centers. We had one other center who I was equally or maybe slightly more deserving coming in of Jeff Saturday.
Yes.
Of the Colts. And I'm like, well, if we're going to have 25, let's get work on the one center, and we can work on Nolan later. But when he had the only vote for Nolan and he made his argument, it was very hard not to advance Nolan out of this group.
No, absolutely. Jack put out a really good argument for Lorenzo Neal. It didn't translate into advancing him any further, but it did sort of alter a bit of perspective. Just if there is going to, I don't know if we're ever going to see another pure fullback in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I suspect not, but I would have thought that Mike Allstott would have been the one person that someone might have stumped for, but it didn't happen. That was Neal, and it was a very good argument.
He had a very good argument for Neal, but he didn't make it out of this group. It was very, very interesting, though.
Yeah.
There was also who made the argument for John Abraham. I can't remember who that was.
I'm not sure.
Because Abraham, I thought, felt like a Hall of Famer when he was playing. Although, like, when you compare him to some other people, things seem a little bit lower than they might be for a Hall of Famer. Mm-hmm. But that was an interesting discussion as well on John Abraham. And on London Fletcher, actually, as well.
Yes. Fletcher is going to be one of those, I guess I want to say a Clay Matthews type, in just like long career, very good for a long period of time. He does have something, though, that Clay doesn't have, and that's just the sick amount of tackles.
Mm-hmm. An insane number of tackles. Mm-hmm.
Fletcher is someone that I could be convinced otherwise, but not someone that I felt passionate enough to really push for. My passion will come out later, as you know. That sounds like that line taken out of context would be really, really bad. My passion will come out later, as you know. Jesus Christ.
Particularly for anyone who follows our show and know where some of your passions lie.
That was a one-time thing, and I was drinking a lot. And there was no camera phones back then, and I just wanted to prove a point. Moving on.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist it when you said that. So.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It takes an awful lot to embarrass me, which is not a good trait in life. It really isn't. Jack also put together a really good push, and it worked for Charles Tillman. And I think for me, he was one of those guys. If you look at his amount of Pro Bowls, that's one of the deceiving ones. It's only 2. But I'm also a big believer in innovation. And the peanut punch. How much did the peanut punch come out in our conversation?
Oh, a ton, because we hear it every weekend in the NFL. Every weekend they talk about how he peanut punched that out there. And if you come up with a move that everybody is imitating, that has to count for something.
Absolutely. And it didn't just... And
if he's forced once, if he's forced the 3rd most fumbles in NFL history, something along those lines.
Right.
He's down on interceptions compared to others, but his overall turnovers that he forced is a ridiculous number comparatively.
Well, and Jack brought up a great statistical point, and it's true. His belief was that forced fumbles are one of the most important defensive stat, and it's also one of the newest. So a lot of people don't really pay attention to forced fumbles, and they should. They absolutely should. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, and I think everyone listening here knows this, sometimes you're collecting that interception. You're just at the right place at the right time. When you're doing a forced fumble, you're definitely playing a far more active part in that play.
Right.
So
yeah.
That
was interesting. We had a couple others too who had pretty good arguments for them. So Simeon Rice, that was another Jack one.
Yep. I believe
basically trying to argue.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
I was going to say basically arguing.
Yeah, no, go on.
Go ahead, my friend. No, please, you go. We're doing this whole.
Well, I actually had something on Donald Driver, but yeah, just go on Rice, and then I'll do something on Driver.
Okay, yeah. So the Simeon Rice argument made by Jack was that he believed that Tampa Bay defense of the early 2000s was one of the best ever in NFL history, and he has statistical reasons to back that up. But his argument was that everyone talks about Sapp and Brooks, and if there's a third person at defense, well, the committee seems to be headed towards John Lynch or Rondé Barber, mostly Lynch at this point, who's been a finalist 6 times, 4 short of becoming an honorary member of Chic, I think, if he goes 4 more. Mm-hmm. But he said that for him, that third member was Simeon Rice's ability to get to the quarterback. That made it so that quarterbacks had to get it out faster and made it easier for the defensive backs on that team. So it was an argument I hadn't really thought of before with Rice, because Rice, like we said, has been a semifinalist. But if you look at his overall statistics and things along those lines, he's a little bit further down, particularly Hall of Fame monitor stuff. And but he made a really good argument that a lot of people listened to.
Mm-hmm. And I believe it was David who was making a big push for Donald Driver.
Mm.
And when you and I were first looking at this, the glut of wide receivers who were preliminary candidates, and it's sort of hard to separate a lot of them, but every single one of them would be your WR1 for at least a half decade. And Driver...
Yeah, so the ones here... Mm-hmm. Can I just mention the guys who didn't get any votes?
Yeah, please.
Statistics we can talk about. For wide receivers who didn't get any votes were Roddy White, Muhsin Muhammad, Derek Mason, and Chad Ochocinco. Mm-hmm. Chad Johnson didn't get any votes.
Yeah,
crazy.
All 4 of them are ranked on the Notinhalloffame 300, too. No, Muhammad's not.
Yeah. Well, Muhammad coming into he was my first cut from this, but he had a much better career than I realized. When I was in wide receivers, I figured I had to cut one of them in the first round, so he ended up being my only wide receiver cut from 130 to 100. But yeah, it was close. So
I guess if there was one mild surprise, I know we said we weren't going to talk about those who didn't get a vote. Chad Johnson would be that for me, and maybe just because I have just so many memories of him being the it wide receiver, and a lot of that was from his own boisterousness, but that's okay. I don't have a problem with people doing that. But he was so good. Just absolutely so good. And I don't quite know what went wrong there. Do you think he gets a bit of a bad rep because he's gotten himself in a bit of trouble? He is cocky. Just there's something about cocky wide receivers these days. It's not the in vogue thing anymore, I guess, once you're not able to produce at that elite level.
Yeah, I mean, that probably kept Terrell Owens out for a couple of years, even though Owens statistically is like the third best wide receiver of all time.
Oh, they totally did that to teach him a lesson. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, and I mean, it led to part of the backlog we have right now when Michael Irvin made it to the final five and people voted against him just because they didn't like him.
Mm-hmm.
Which took a spot that since he was getting in, that meant that someone else who should have gotten consideration later didn't, in a whole thing, which is a pain in the butt. But
right.
But I think more than anything with this group, like the other wide receivers are Donald Driver, Henry Ellard, Torrey Holt, Calvin Johnson, Jimmy Smith, Rod Smith, Heinz Ward, Reggie Wayne, and Wes Bunker. I think it's
sick.
A tough group. It's a tough group. So I think this is, I don't know, this, and the offensive line too. Like those are the two toughest spots anyone to get through out of from all people who are nominated here, because that offensive line group is also really, really strong. But yeah, I think that's more than anything that it was not necessarily Chad Johnson's mouth. It was the competition he was up against, and we only had so many spots.
Right. I mean, imagine I think I'd agree with you that Musa Muhammad is the weakest of that wide receiver lot. And if that's again, as a Saints fan, like if that was my number one guy for a half decade, I'm happy. Who wouldn't be? I mean, obviously not.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, so, according to the metric, just Musa Muhammad is the 61st best wide receiver of all time.
Which is good.
Think of how many wide receivers there have been in the NFL. Mm-hmm. That's pretty good.
Absolutely. So we said that the top three people would advance. Those three were Nolan. Oh, go ahead. Did you want?
Sorry, one other person we didn't talk about who had a decent number of votes was Rodney Harrison.
Yes. Yeah.
So I
just
want to go into that quickly,
sure.
Because we basically after Tom talked about Nolan, all just decided we were advancing him out of the group and talking about something else.
We did.
But yeah, Rodney Harrison, because we had a couple of Patriots. So we had Harrison and we had Teddy Bruschi, who I love. Teddy Bruschi. He's probably I don't know, maybe he's one of my top 5 favorite athletes of my life from Boston, or in my Boston sports fandom. But I've come to the understanding that he will never be a Hall of Famer. He just doesn't have the statistics, and part of that's the Patriot system and everything else. But Rodney Harrison, again, who, if we judge by Pro Bowls, we always say Rodney Harrison went to 1 Pro Bowl and Brendan Merriweather went to 2, which is all you have to know about how the system is screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
But Rodney Harrison is one of the greatest leaders and one of the best players at his position not just for the Patriots, but also with the Chargers. And also, he always likes to joke he was the most philanthropic member of the NFL because he had more fines that went to the Players Defense Fund than anything else. But yeah, Rodney Harrison is somebody who I think deserves more consideration than he gets. I honestly think if Harrison breaks up the David Tyree play, that everybody feels a little bit different, like he somehow saved the Super Bowl rather than not bring anti-Stickum to knock that out. But Harrison had a pretty good, had a lot of people think about him as well. So that's all.
Harrison does that, and Eli Manning doesn't get talked about nearly as much for the Hall of Fame.
No. And Boston sports fans officially become the most insufferable people on the planet.
So what we did from here is we allowed everyone to have 3 votes. All 3 advanced to the group of those who had 2. That was Nayland, Tillman, and Rice. Others who received votes were Lorenzo Neal, Jimmy Smith, Donald Driver, Big Willie Anderson, Leslie O'Neill, John Abraham, London Fletcher, Rodney Harrison, Reggie Roby, and Steve McNair.
Yeah, well, we also had a 4-way tie, though, because we had Simeon Rice, London Fletcher, Rodney Harrison, and Charles Tillman.
Right.
All had 3 votes when we were done with that, and we had to re-vote again with just those 4.
Yes.
And Tillman and Rice advanced with Harrison finishing 3rd and Fletcher finishing 4th. So.
Survivor rules.
Survivor rules is how it works, but it was a really good debate. That part took the longest of anything. Of our thing, getting through the ones, which is funny because we were like, oh, none of these people are going to make it very far anyway. We were wrong.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And that's where, passion sort of comes up. So then we went back to the top, just a much easier one. Those who had all but 2 votes, and there was only 3. Reggie Wayne, Zach Thomas, both finalists last year, and Patrick Willis, who was a semifinalist last year. I thought he was going to get through to the finals last year. I think you did too.
Yeah.
And so that that was a quick conversation. We just put them all through.
Oh, we just put them all through. Yeah. So now we're up to 11 who are through up the 25 spots.
Yeah. So this is to me was another very, very interesting step next, because then we just kept up with the upper part. So we just combined those who had 7 votes, 6 votes, and 5 votes. So there were 6 people. So the ones who had 7 were running back Sean Alexander, defensive lineman Jared Allen, defensive lineman Richard Seymour. With 6 votes, defensive back Rondé Barber, special teams player Steve Tasker, and at 5, previous semifinalist linebacker Sam Mills.
Previous finalists. He was finalist last year.
Yeah. Did I say semifinalist?
You did, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so finalists last year. And only 5 of them went through right away. One got demoted.
Yeah, I hate to say I was kind of the force behind getting him demoted. So there were 4 of them we pretty much all agreed on we were going to advance through. That was, I was surprised actually at the amount of support originally, and then the amount of still feeling towards having Sean Alexander go through.
Mm-hmm.
I know he was an MVP and everything like that, but he hasn't seemed to have gotten a ton of consideration yet from the Hall. And it was interesting to see that, A, he was this high up, and B, everyone was like, yeah, no. He was just one of the best players. He should be in. Jack did bring up the fact that he interviewed somebody, can't remember who he was interviewing, or played against Sean Alexander. We thought that Alexander was just the guy. So the guy who actually played against him in the NFL, I can't remember who it was. But there was not as much debate about Alexander as I anticipated, who, by the way, Alexander was my 24th guy out of 25. And still everybody thought, yeah, he should go through.
I had him much higher.
Yeah, I had him 24 out of 25.
Yeah.
My last 2 were my 2 running backs.
Okay.
Sean Alexander and Ricky Waters. Sean Alexander, Ricky Waters, my last 2 people I put through on my list of 25. We had I don't think we even mentioned Seymour's name. He just was presumed he was going through.
No, there was nothing discussed about him at all.
Rondé Barber is still a heck of a player we all thought was easily through, and Steve Tasker is a favorite of many people. If we're ever going to have someone, if we've determined that his position is worthy of the Hall of Fame, and I think that we have Matthew Slater out there now still playing. How many first team All Pros did Steve Tasker have? 9? Something crazy like that?
I'll look that up. I don't think it was that many.
I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. I'll look that up right now. But whatever. If there's ever anyone who's going to be from that position in the Hall of Fame, it's Tasker.
Oh, actually, none.
A lot of support in that room.
None.
So Tasker was a 7-time
Pro Bowl.
7-time Pro Bowler. I'm sorry. He had no first team All Pros, but he was a 7-time Pro Bowler. So those 4 guys made it through easily. The only 2 we had any debate about were Jared Allen and Mills.
Yeah, and Jared Allen, I think, is one of those guys who, and I referred to him, and and Vinny was right up there with me on that. To me, I just thought of him as that version's Kevin Green. Super good at what he did, had hair that made you notice him, and had an external personality that made you always remember him. And I always thought that Allen was a little overrated still, which doesn't mean that I don't think that he's not a Hall of Famer. I think he's on that cusp. But I've always felt that way about Kevin Green. Like, yeah, you were really good, but I don't know if you were great. Like, I thought your personality brought you higher than maybe you were. And it turned out I wasn't alone in that.
Yeah. I didn't think that much about Jared Allen as opposed to like someone I wouldn't consider going through. I could see that argument. I think Jared Allen's a little bit better than that. But again, who knows exactly? But there's no question to me that Jared Allen's in the top 25.
Yeah, and I think also, too, at this point, we all sort of collectively realized, okay, so is this someone that we're really going to go into a deep dive now, or do we agree that he's in that top 25, and do we really collectively figure out, is he someone we want to put in as a 15? Should the Pro Football Hall of Fame put him in the top 25? I think I'm reading the room on that one, correct, right?
I think you are, too, yeah.
Yeah.
So that list left us with one person, Sam Mills, and we were just going to vote everyone through. You're like, so can we just vote all these folks through? And I said, can I just talk about one person I don't get? And I brought up Mills. I just, in my cut downs, Sam Mills was a very, very good player, and has an incredible story and is an incredibly nice guy. According to that, again, and not that the thing they come up with is the be-all, end-all of who should be in the Hall of Fame and who shouldn't. But Sam Mills is the 20th inside linebacker in their rankings. He didn't make my cut from where I'm trying to figure out where I cut him. Give me a second. I think I cut him from 60 to 50.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I cut him. So my cuts from 60 to 50 were Albert Lewis, Corey Dillon, Donovan McNabb, Fred Taylor, Jamal Lewis, Justin Smith, Kent Hull, Sam Mills, Warwick Dunn, and Wes Welker. Those are my cuts from 60 to 50. And Sam Mills was a finalist last year. And a lot of other people, particularly, there are a couple of people who were helped and hurt by people from the same team who we were comparing them against. And I think when we start talking about it, you and I were big proponents of Mills' teammate, Pat Swilling.
Yes.
We'll talk about in a second. And I think people's opinions of Swilling allowed us to have further discussion about Mills. So we advanced the 5 and had Mills kind of sit down and get compared to some other folks as we're coming back up.
Right. So Mills got demoted, and we'll go back to him later. So we put 5 more through, so that brought us to 16.
Yep.
So then we went to those with 2 votes, with Nayland, Rice, and Tillman advancing. And here was the group that they went in with, that they were now in sort of that same plateau, I guess elevator, we'll say. Running backs, Corey Dillon, Herschel Walker, and last year's semifinalist, Fred Taylor. The highest voted tight end, Keith Jackson. One of your guys, Logan Mankins. And someone who you have really turned a lot of people around, defensive lineman Kevin Williams. Linebacker Lance Briggs, and special teams kick returner, punt returner, Brian Mitchell.
Yep. So we've already talked about Nayland and Tillman and Rice. Let's talk about. I guess Jack came in with his part on both Briggs and Brian Mitchell. He really wanted to talk about how people felt about Briggs.
Yes.
Who here in Chicago, many people think was underrated because he was next to Urlacher. Now, it's a question whether he may help make Urlacher that good, Urlacher help make him that good. But a lot of people here felt that Lance Briggs deserves more credit than he does, and that Urlacher might have gotten a little bit too much credit. Mm-hmm. So he was asking how people felt as the Bears fan outside of the area, and we had a pretty good discussion about Briggs.
Yes,
going forward here. So that was an interesting one. And then he also had Brian Mitchell, is he second or third all time in all-purpose yards?
I believe second, but either way, he's right up there. I mean, it's disgusting, his amount.
Yeah, and he never gets mentioned because we don't think of return yards as yards, which is dumb. But, I mean, if you have a running play and gain 35 yards, everyone goes crazy. If you have a kickoff and gain 35 yards, that somehow doesn't count. It's very strange. But Brian Mitchell is somebody who is criminally underrated because his skill is not as valued by Hall of Fame voters if people are compiling these stats and everything like that. So, and even with the Hall of Fame metric they came up with, the people who are hurt the most in that thing are the special teamers. People are good at special teams. All their stuff is just not as high or important as other players. Like you put Brian Mitchell in just as a running back and what he did running, that's not nearly what he did in terms of importance on the football field. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I don't think also too they've figured out quite how to analyze tight ends yet.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the highest rated tight end we had was Ben Coates in terms of that thing. Coates didn't make it to this point.
No.
Keith Jackson did. As a Patriots fan, Ben Coates was an absolute force of nature. If you want to just be like, if people are like, yeah, Ben Coates, he was okay, just go back and watch Ben Coates highlights and watch him just run through 6 and 8 people on a play. It's incredible when you go back and watch it. Now his stats don't line up with other like Tony Gonzalez or people like that, but he was the second team tight end on the all-decade team for the 90s. And I don't think he'll ever get in. But the tight end position does seem undervalued because the blocking tight ends are judged like wide receivers in how many yards they catch and everything like that, but they're blocking. They're still offensive line in many ways. And their blocking is super important to what they do on the field and how their team performs. That's one of the things about Gronkowski. Gronkowski gets all the credit for the touchdowns and everything like that, but he's probably one of the best top blocking tight ends the league has ever seen at the same time. So Jackson was the only one who made it this far, though. I did that whole thing on coach season here. Mm-hmm. But we didn't really have much thing on Jackson. But he did get a vote when we came to trying to decide who was going to advance the next round.
He did. And actually, do you want to do your pitch on Kevin Williams? Because you made a great thing.
Why don't you do yours or Herschel Walker first?
Sure.
That was also very, very good.
Oh, thank you. Didn't work.
It did not. It came close.
It came close.
But it did not quite work.
No, well, which is sort of like I said. I mean, I might have been sort of the originator, but in electoral college, I thought I'd be California. I wasn't. Oh well. Such is life. Yeah. So my argument with Herschel Walker is it's the Pro Football Hall of Fame. There's nowhere where it says it's the NFL Hall of Fame, and we all know that they looked at the AAFC, the brief league from 46 to 50, the AFL, but the USFL, which was a pretty good league in its own right, does not get covered. So stats that happen there aren't translated. I get that. I understand. They don't count. And I've always had a problem with that. I mean, Warren Moon gets more credit for his yardage in the Canadian Football League and his accomplishments there. And I always think, why? I'm a Canadian. I've seen a lot of CFL, but I know it's just not the same level of players. It can't be. And for anyone wondering why that is, the Canadian Football League mandates that about 60%, I might be off on my percentage, but I know it's higher than 50, have to be Canadian. And in Canada, as much as there's a lot of great athletes, there's not a lot of great football players. We love football, but a lot of us don't play it. It's just not there. So the amount of talent in the CFL, which is a fun game to watch, it's a fun product, it's not there. So the USFL blows it away. It just does. So Walker came in, played 3 years in the USFL, and I think we all agreed he was their star.
Mm-hmm. He was the best player in the league.
Best player in the league, put asses in seats, and he accumulated in the USFL in just 3 years 5,562 rushing yards, with 2,411 being in his last year. Receiving, so he's a true dual threat back, 1,484, total touchdown 61. So I argued that if he went into the NFL and just hypothetically say it's 60% of what he would have done. Arguably. I mean, obviously we don't know, but I think 60% is a very conservative number. Like, it could have been very high, could have been a lot higher. That puts him well over 11,000 yards rushing. That brings him to receiving yards, if I give him 1,000, or let's say 900, that gives him 5,700. So right there, he's at that 18,000 yards from scrimmage. If we go by the metric of Pro Football Reference and approximate value, he still had 98 in the NFL. If we give him, again, a conservative number of just 10 in those first 3 years, just 10, he's at 128, which matches LaDainian Tomlinson.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a very good argument you had. I've heard you make it before.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on board with it going forward. I think the one place it fell short is that a lot of guys didn't feel like Herschel Walker when he came into the pros was as dominant a player as he was in the USFL. And he wasn't. He came up just a little short. I mean, he came up, one vote short?
Well, yeah, you know what else hurts him, too, that we didn't talk about the other night? And this is something... yes, the trade. And this is something that I always believe... Well, I mean, I think everyone believes that. Perception is reality. The Cowboys traded Herschel Walker for a shit ton of stuff. I'm not going to go into all of it because I can look. Actually, I could look at it right now. I'm on that page.
Yeah, I'm actually. You keep going. I'm looking it up.
Okay. Actually, no. Because I'm on. Oh, it's not on the Pro Football Reference. What's the matter with that? Anyway, so they got players, a glut of draft picks, and it turned the Cowboys from also-rans to a mini dynasty. And that changes the whole reality. Is that Herschel's fault? No. I mean, I think the same thing applied to Eric Lindros in hockey. When the Quebec Nordiques took him number 1 overall, even though he said he'd never play for him, but they traded him for so much draft picks and then the rights to a player who turned out to be better than him and Peter Forsberg.
Yeah. So the picks here for Dallas ended up with Emmitt Smith, a guy named Stan Smagala, I don't remember that man, Russell Maryland, Alonzo Highsmith, Kevin Smith, Darren Woodson, Mike, who else is there? Yeah, so Clayton Holmes, and the Vikings ended up with Jake Reed and Walker.
Right.
So it was really ultimately what players who mattered: Emmitt Smith, Russell Maryland, Clayton Holmes, Kevin Smith, and Darren Woodson for Walker and Jake Reed.
It was the trade that turned it all around.
Yeah,
and that narrative kills him. And I've said this to Vinny all the time too. When we talk about Phillip Rivers, I know it's sort of I'm going way off topic here, but I've said this to him. It's like here we've got Drew Brees was sort of sent away for Phillip Rivers, and Rivers had a great career, who had a better career. It's pretty obvious at this point, even though it's not over. But Drew Brees is a first ballot Hall of Famer, and Phillip Rivers, we're going to be debating about this for 30 years. possibly, whether he's a Hall of Famer or not.
I have a quarterback on a bye week, and my backup quarterback I had on my fantasy team was Cam Newton, and I don't necessarily feel good about Cam, and I had to go looking for another quarterback. I'm in a 2-quarterback league, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to take Rivers, aren't I? That's all you need to know about Philip Rivers at this point.
It's a funny thing because that perception will change so much stuff. And then does that have anything to do with Walker? No. I'll throw this out. I'm surprised nobody brought this up. Walker is a staunch Trump supporter. Does this matter in a room like that?
I don't think so.
And it shouldn't.
I mean, I don't think of Walker's. I don't think of Walker being political at all. He's not someone who I've ever thought about.
Okay.
So, yeah, but I mean, it didn't help also that he spent only 2 years with the Vikings and then was gone.
Mm-hmm.
He spent 2 years with the Vikings, a couple years with the Eagles, 1 year with the Giants, and then finished his career back with the Cowboys. So yeah, that also didn't help the perception. And the Cowboys went on to win multiple Super Bowls, and the 2 years with the Vikings, they didn't even make the playoffs.
Right.
So that doesn't help either. That's not his fault either, but it doesn't help perception.
Well, yeah, it's like when Ricky Williams gets drafted by the Saints, the dumbest draft thing in sports. Ricky gets a label. Mike Ditka, because he had accomplished so much with the Bears, just like got to walk away like la 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 la.
And he still hasn't finished a sentence since then. It bothers me every time he's on TV. He never gets the last word of his sentence in before he's on to the next thought. So you had a really good argument for Walker and ended up just one vote short.
Mm-hmm.
I said at this point before we voted that I just wanted to bring up my one pound the table person. And I never thought that I was going to end up being the Kevin Williams stan in the room. Kevin Williams, as I've said before, is one of the people who's done mostly wrong by the NFL with the whole Star Caps thing, which is still one of the dumbest suspensions of all time. But Williams, I thought, was very, very good. But again, I'm watching football on the East Coast. I've never had any of the fancy football packages or whatever it is. So never really got to see Kevin Williams a ton, right? Like I might see him in a late afternoon game should the Vikings be on. But those late afternoon games are almost always the Cowboys for us on the East Coast, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't get to see him as much. But I was going through all of his statistics. And let me just give you quickly the history of defensive tackles in the NFL. I'm going to give you in order as to who the best defensive tackles in NFL history are. Number 1, Bob Lilly, Hall of Famer. 2, Alan Page, Hall of Famer. 3, Randy White, Hall of Famer. 4, Mean Joe Green, Hall of Famer. 5, John Randall, Hall of Famer. 6, Warren Sapp, Hall of Famer. 7, Merlin Olsen, Hall of Famer. 8, Cortez Kennedy, Hall of Famer. 9, Kevin Williams. Like, I didn't realize that's where he was. He has 5 first-team All-Pros and 6 Pro Bowls. Like, it is... just when you look at all the numbers and everything, he has 569 solo tackles, which is like way ahead of Sapp and Randall and I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong line. It's 370 total tackles, but he's right up there with Sapp and Randall and everybody else. The guy who's right behind him, by the way, in the list, and I'm sure this guy's going to pass him shortly, is Aaron Donald. And then Henry Jordan and Alex Karras, 2 more Hall of Famers after that. So he 100% belongs. I said that an average Hall of Famer is 100 rated. He's 103.28. There's just no question. 5-time first-team All-Pro, and he only had 2 votes coming into this. I couldn't believe he was that low. And because Kevin Williams is one of I did not expect to be banging the table for Kevin Williams. But coming in, he was something like, yeah, he was a good player. No, I went through and I spent a lot of time on narrowing down my list. Mm-hmm. He ended up being the guy who's like, wow, I was wrong at how good this guy was, and people agreed with me.
Mm-hmm. Myself included.
He was one of the three. He was one of the three people make out of this room. He was actually the only one in this room originally who made it out of this room. So
yeah, because Nolan and Tillman went. They jumped 2 spots.
Yep, and Herschel Walker ended up 1 vote short, and then Logan Mankins, who I think we both think is going to be Hall of Famer probably in the next 5 years, ended up 2 votes short.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had 1 vote for Rice, Briggs, Mitchell, and Keith Jackson. None for Dylan or Taylor. I'm telling you, man, those Bengals still got no respect.
Well, Vance, we needed you in that room, buddy.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't do a very good job with the Patriots either. That first room, we had Coates, Harrison, and Brewski, and I couldn't get any of them out. And it's Santi Samuel, but I'm never going to put up a fight for Santi Samuel. And then in room 2, we have Dylan and Mankins. I didn't get either of them out either. Instead, I got the Viking out of the room.
Yeah, like you
Good
tried.
job, Patriots.
Hey, I stood by while a Saint got demoted.
True. But ultimately, a Saint got in, too. So that ended up working out.
So then we get to I guess sort of the main event of the evening. We had 19 people left and 9 spots. So we have so Sam Mills who fell, Nayland Williams and Tillman who went up, and then we just put a big glob of all the ones who had 4 votes and 3 votes. So in addition to those 4, those with 4 votes, quarterback Randall Cunningham, quarterback Donovan McNabb, running back Ricky Waters, wide receiver Heinz Ward, center Jeff Saturday, offensive lineman Steve Wisniewski, defensive back Neil Smith, offensive lineman Richmond Webb. Those with 3 votes, wide receiver Henry Ellard. Oh, did I miss something?
You said defensive back Neil Smith. He's a defensive end.
Oh, why did I say that? Sorry about that. Wide receiver.
You had it on your chart wrong, so that's why.
Oh, well, I it must have been right there next to Josie and the Pussycats.
I would love to see Neil Smith play defensive back, but I don't think he was cut out for it.
I thought you were going to say, when you started that sentence, I thought you were going to say, I would love to see Neil Smith play for Josie and the Pussycats.
That would also be entertaining. But no.
Yeah. So those with 3 votes, wide receiver Henry Ellard, offensive tackles Lomas Brown and Eric Allen, defensive tackle Bryant Young, linebacker Clay Matthews, and another offensive tackle Reuben Brown.
And
linebacker Pat Swilling.
There we go.
Oh, I did talk about quite a bit. Because I'm more of a Swilling guy than a Mills guy.
Yeah, and that made a big difference, honestly.
Well, I mean, I think he was just a bigger deal in the Dome Patrol behind Ricky Jackson. To me, Swilling was more of the difference maker, and I think I wasn't the only one in that room who bought into that. I think there were a lot of people who had Swilling near the top of their list or near their cut line.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, he only got 3 votes coming in, but 2 of them are on this call. So we're obviously going to be a pro Swilling room right here.
Right.
But I think you made a pretty good argument for it. Swilling is another guy who I thought was really, really good. And then coming into this, he ended up being much higher up than I anticipated him being. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I cut Sam Mills between 60 and 50. Swilling made it all the way through. He was my number. Hold on, let me just see where he ended up here. I'm in the wrong part of my sheet. He ended up as my number 18. So that's pretty good.
And so we talked quite a bit about the 2 quarterbacks, Cunningham and McNabb. Mm-hmm. And I asked the one question I was hoping I was going to get an answer in that room because I know you and I can't really figure it out completely. People hate Donovan McNabb, not us, but the people who vote on the site just trash the guy. There's nobody who plummets more yearly because for those who are new listening, the Not in Hall of Fame Top 300, for those who are not in the hall, I'll slot in somebody initially and then votes and comments will alter accordingly because it's a liquid vote. I want it to be, and I want people's opinion to matter. And the hatred for Donovan McNabb, especially if you ever see whenever he'll say that he should be in the Hall of Fame and just the hate he gets, like on Twitter, is just brutal.
Yeah. But, yeah, I think this was another situation, too, when we were talking about we have Swilling and Mills, two linebackers from the Saints, and then we had Cunningham and McNabb, two quarterbacks from the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting juxtaposition because with the way the NFL has gone, and this isn't necessarily fair to McNabb, who is a decently mobile quarterback, but Randall Cunningham has basically become, in many ways, the model for where quarterbacks are going. You end up being ahead of time. Now, Cunningham's issue is that due to injuries, he only played 7 really full seasons in the NFL as a starter. But, I mean, even with those 7 full seasons, Drew Bledsoe, who we haven't talked about at all and didn't end up here, had played 12 seasons and is essentially, except for passing yards, essentially the statistical equal of Cunningham in terms of a Hall of Fame monster, right? So if he did that, if he did Bledsoe's career in 5 years less, if he had more time, what does that mean? You know what I mean? So that was an interesting thing. When it comes to the McNabb hate, I mean, I think more than anything, there are two issues. One is how things ended with the whole joining the Redskins thing, which went over like, hey, he just needed to join a team not in the division.
Right.
Right? Like there's 28 other teams. Just pick one of those. And 2, that 2-minute drill in the Super Bowl was one of the worst 2-minute drills you're ever going to see. The Eagles had a legitimate shot to win that game, and he was throwing up.
Mm-hmm. Literally.
And, yeah, they're literally throwing up, and they moved in super slow motion. And that was part of the hit against Andy Reid, which his lesson now that the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, but it's still a thing. Andy Reid is one of the worst coaches at clock management ever. And that 2-minute drill and McNabb throwing up and everything did not help McNabb. If McNabb finishes that drive and they beat the Patriots, we're having a whole separate discussion. Right?
Right.
I mean, he brought them, to 6 consecutive NFC title games?
4.
Was it only 4 consecutive?
Yeah, it was 4 consecutive, winning the last one.
Okay. All right, so I brought him to 4 consecutive NFC title games. That's how many Eagles quarterbacks have ever done that?
This is also, too, young fans, don't look at what the NFC East is now. Back then, my God, just getting out of the NFC, too, was super hard. And, who was his greatest wide receiver? Well, I guess T.O. for a year.
Freddie Mitchell.
Yeah. Brett Selleck. You know, like,
Selleck is yeah.
I don't know when he was good, but I mean, like, we're not going to be. This is going to be the first and only time he's ever going to be mentioned on one of our shows. Of course, with us, that may not be true.
Probably not.
Yeah. So we all sort of like them both, but Cunningham definitely got more love from us.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. And all right, I'll just sort of spoil one thing. When we decided to do the next level of voting, I suggested, and I'm kind of glad I did, that because this was sort of the deciding round, whoever you're most passionate about, you get 3 votes for that, 2 for the next one, and then you can put 5 ones. And Randall Cunningham was the next one through.
Yeah.
So the highest vote getter in I guess we'll call the meat round. That's what I'm kind of calling it in the write-up, the meat of the sandwich. Sorry, vegans.
Yeah, sorry. Just by the way, he brought them to 2003 Eagles that he brought to the NFC Championship game, and he was a first-team All-Pro and Pro Bowler. Here are his offensive weapons that year. You ready?
I'm ready.
Running back Brian Westbrook, very good player. No, I'm not going to say anything against Brian Westbrook.
No.
Running back Corell Buckhalter, not quite as good, but okay, right? And Deuce Staley, how underrated guy was there. Running backs are fine. Here are the rest of the people. Tight ends, L.J. Smith and Chad Lewis. Wide receivers.
That sounds like somebody that would have been signed by Motown in like the early 80s.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure L.J. Smith and Chad Lewis are members of 98 Degrees, and you can't convince me otherwise. Fullback John Ritchie. John Ritchie was one of the best fullbacks in the league. But his wide receiving core was James Thrash, Todd Pinkston, Freddie Mitchell, Greg Lewis, and Billy McMullen.
Whamp.
He brought that team with James Thrash, Todd Pinkston, Freddie Mitchell, Greg Lewis, and Billy McMullen to the NFC Championship game. And won first-team All-Pro.
That's a bigger carry job than Iverson when he took the Sixers to the NBA Finals. Yeah.
I mean, no offense to Westbrook and Staley. Those guys are good. But that is, that's tough.
No, it's very, very tough. Cunningham, too, I always think doesn't get enough credit for this. And I know we touched on that. Vinny's also huge on this. 3 Burt Bell Awards, which is the MVP given by the Maxwell Football Club. If those were AP MVPs, there's no discussion right now. He's already in with Cunningham.
Yeah. So are we saying? Well, we're told when Cunningham got in. We're giving what happened to McNabb, or are we going to wait?
We might as well.
Let's wait.
Let's wait. Okay.
Well, let's wait. We can wait.
Sure.
Should we? So Cunningham had a good conversation. We had a good conversation about Swilling. We've already gone through Naylor and Williams and Tillman. Someone else who got a lot of love in that room, surprisingly, who I'm actually pretty high on, was Lomas Brown.
Yeah, myself also.
Brown was a very good player on some very bad Lions teams, and doesn't get nearly the credit that he should, just because those teams got their butts kicked by the Packers pretty much every single year and never really got anywhere. The Lions, they got their butts kicked by everybody. But it was really refreshing to see the support for Brown in the room.
I think just to go sort of add on to that, of how little support he gets, 2 years ago he wasn't even it was last year, he wasn't even on the preliminary list.
Which is insane.
It's disgusting. It is asinine. So thankfully, whoever sort of set up the preliminary list, I don't actually know how they do this. They did anyone can write in, essentially. If I think, like I told you, the one time I did write in for Ray Clay, not Ray Claiborne. I wrote in for Ray Claiborne. What am I saying? One time, and I don't know if he ended up anywhere, but I wrote in for it. I think anyone can basically come and do it, from what I understand, and then they go from there. I don't know. But yeah, Lomas Brown got a lot of love in that room, and justifiably so. I don't know if we were overcompensating. I'd like to think we weren't. Overcompensating for the lack of respect he received. And I think it was Jack who brought up, someone had a block. So Barry Sanders at least had to have one good blocker.
You'd think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lomas Brown got a lot of love. And honestly, who was our Lions fan? I'm trying to remember who was with what team.
Was that David?
That was Dave. Yeah, you're right. No, that was Dave. So Dave was the Lions fan. And he had some really good things to say too, but wasn't necessarily pounding the table for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, Moments Brown, we had a lot of discussion in that room.
Yeah.
As did Richmond Webb, friend of the show. Friend of the website, anyway.
Absolutely. And I tried to stay, actually, I did. I stayed pretty quiet on that one because that's someone who I had the pleasure of interviewing. And just what was summed up in that room is just like what I was always thinking, like, this is another underrated player. 7 straight Pro Bowls by a Dolphin. He's the only Dolphin ever to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not.
And our Bills fan was one most found.
Oh, that's right, Glenn. Yes.
He's like, think of a Bills fan standing up for a Dolphin.
That's right. Yeah, Glenn was really big on that one, and it's true. I mean, it was so true. Just from that, actually, yeah, that's Glenn. If you're listening, how are you going to explain to people that you were like pushing more a Dolphin than anyone else?
Yeah, but it was very interesting having him. Then we had a good Jeff Saturday against Tom Nalen discussion, and seemed to sort of come to the idea that, just so you know, Saturday and Nalen, according to the list, are the 9th, and there's 7 Senators of the Hall of Fame. The top 7 guys are all in the Hall of Fame. Number 8 is Marquise Pouncey, who's still playing. Number 9 is Saturday, and 10 is Naylor. And Nalen retired first, so we kind of seemed to come to a group decision that we were going to reward Tom anyway for how good he was, but that both of them were worthy. But if we were only going to put one through, Nalen's been waiting longer. So I think that hurt Saturday a little bit. Plus, a few people thought that Saturday benefited from the quick release of Manning. And that helped him some, which may be true. But Jeff Saturday still was the anchor of that line for the entire Manning Colts era. So that I thought that was pretty important.
One person who didn't advance, who didn't get nearly what I thought he would have, and I think it might just be that whole wide receiver glut, Heinz Ward, Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah, and I did mention that he is my least favorite NFL player of all time.
Yes, you did.
Although to be fair, I mentioned that after it was clear that he wasn't getting much support. I didn't want to color the room until afterwards. But yeah, I dislike pretty much everything about Heinz Ward's game. So I was a little surprised that he didn't get more support. Particularly since Henry Ellard, who's a name who we sort of forget many times, did have a lot of support in the room.
Yeah, I believe it was Ted who mentioned, or he sent something after him, like when at the point of his retirement, he was number 3 in receiving yards.
Yeah, behind Rice and I can't remember who the other person was.
Largent, maybe?
It might have been Largent. But regardless, he was number 3 all time. You have to judge players by the era they're in.
Absolutely.
I mean, Don Hudson may have been the greatest wide receiver for all time, or at least, other than Rice, as far as we know, but nobody was throwing the football back then. And he's way down in the receptions and yards list because of it. But Henry Ellard, it was great to see Ellard get a bit of support in that room because I had him higher in my list than I anticipated, and I wasn't expecting him to have as much support at that point as he did.
Another person who got nothing, no support at all, which is going to anger the Cleveland base. Clay Matthews. 3 of us voted him. I was one of those, actually.
I was not.
Yeah, and I think I was going through just a lot of longevity. And I also wanted to talk about him, too. And I think there was some strategic voting by some of us, just for the sake of having that discussion. And Clay Matthews is one of those guys I never, even though I put him on my 25, he's been a bubble guy for me. God, it almost feels like forever because this is his second. Is this his last? Yeah, this is his last year on the actual ballot.
Yes, this is his last year. His aunt is Tasker's too, or is Tasker? I think Tasker has one more.
Tasker's got one more.
Yeah.
So yeah, Clay Matthews, and he's a compiler. He was, a very good player. But was there ever at any time that any of us ever thought, okay, this guy's the top 5 in his position? And I've always felt that same way about Frank Gore, but Gore just accumulated so much and I guess because you've got that one rushing yardage stat, Gore's going to get in at some point. I think we all agree on that. Clay Matthews, is he hurt by the fact that he doesn't have that same statistical grab? But he's also helped by the fact that he's so beloved by a fan base.
But that fan base is the Browns, who are, in many ways, I know the Browns when he played are different than the Browns now.
Sure.
But the Browns are, let's be honest, they were one of the proudest franchise of the 50s. They're a very proud franchise up through the team moving to Baltimore. I'm sorry, up till they're stopping play for 3 years while the expansion franchise with all their players and management went to Baltimore, which is officially the league's position on that.
Sure.
But I mean, since they drafted Tim Couch, they're pretty much if not for the Lions, are they pretty much a laughingstock of the league? Over the last 20 years?
What would you rather be, a Lions fan or a Browns fan?
Browns, and I'll tell you why. Lions, how many playoff games have the Lions ever won? Since in the Super Bowl era, how many playoff games have the Lions won?
Jesus, I can't think of one. Did they win at least one in the wild card era, like in the early wild card?
They've won one. They've won one since the Super Bowl started. They've won one playoff game.
Okay. See,
I'd rather have the Browns' history and all the stuff with that than the Lions.
See, I'm going the other way, and that's only because then I can watch the game indoors.
Is it going to be miserable? At least don't get rained on at the same time.
Well, snow and all that stuff. I mean, Detroit, Cleveland. I mean, I'm a Toronto guy. I've gone to a shit ton of Buffalo games. I know it is. Seeing these games in bad weather. I used to go on those bus junkets, and some of the people I go with. I mean, I know that they piss themselves just to stay warm. I know that happened. I should have asked Glenn about that if he's ever done that.
I did want to ask Glenn if he'd ever jumped through a table, but I thought that was impolite for some of them.
I have a feeling we can all ask him that. He wouldn't have a problem.
Yeah. So Clay Matthews didn't get a lot of support. Neither did Bryant Young, who was a finalist last year.
Well, one thing we all shook our head. It's not a shot at Bryant Young. I mean, he still got to this section with us, so obviously we respect him. But Bryant Young was a surprise to me when he was a semifinalist, let alone being a finalist.
Mm-hmm.
And to go over Patrick Willis,
Yeah, that made no sense.
I honestly...
Yeah, that made no sense.
The only thing I could think of is Bryant, Kobe Bryant, Steve Young. Were they confused? I feel like I'm taking a big dump on this guy, and I really don't want to do that because he was a phenomenal player. He really was. But I think we were all in that agreement, and I wonder if sometimes are we just looking at maybe he shouldn't have been there, so we weren't looking as hard. And that's possible too, because I've always said this. It's people voting on people. And there's just no... But, the same problem, and a computer looks at data too much. And we're going to get this all right. We're going to be expanding this. This is a lot of fun, and we're going to keep doing it. But I think maybe just because I always want to be transparent. So I think we could say who got the most votes and how they sort of played out. And I did make a mistake initially because I had Lynch there twice before, so we had to. I think you probably saw the Twitter thread.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, we could do that. But well, just one more person we haven't talked about. Two more people.
Oh,
we had a good discussion about Neil Smith.
Yes.
Not a defensive back.
Yeah.
Not as many people voted for him in the end as I thought they were going to. I was one of two people who voted for Neil Smith.
Mm-hmm.
In the final group, he got one of my votes. But Neil Smith is somebody who deserves a lot more consideration in the future as we're going through this. I mean, part of this is our first time we've ever done this. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we also haven't talked about Ricky Waters and Eric Allen. Waters got a vote. Eric Allen didn't end up with any. But two very good players who we just didn't have much to say about.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one person we had a decent conversation about left is Steve Wisniewski.
Yes.
From the Raiders, who we had a debate as to whether he was dirtier or better than he should have been. Because we had the conversation, everyone loves Jack Tatum, which I mentioned Patriots fans do not, and Darryl Stingley's family certainly does not.
No.
But being dirty in the 70s versus being dirty in the 90s was a very different thing for football. But Wisniewski still was one of the best offensive linemen of the 90s. And it's somebody who deserves some more consideration. So that's everybody in this round. I just want to make sure we mentioned everybody who's here.
Yes.
So it was Sam Mills, Randall Cunningham, Ricky Waters, Heinz Ward, Jeff Saturday, Steve Wisniewski, Neil Smith, Richmond Webb, Donovan McNabb, Henry Ellard, Lomas Brown, Eric Allen, Bryant Young, Clay Matthews, Reuben Brown, Pat Swilling, Tom Nalen, Kevin Williams, and Charles Tillman were the 19 people we were taking for 9 spots.
Right. So highest voter receiver in this round. Voter receiver, nice, Kirk. Randall Cunningham. So he is on our semifinals list. Added was
18th person.
17th, because I got that off. So
17th. No, yeah, I'm looking at the spreadsheet.
I didn't update that particular one. I'm just fixing it, and that's when I sent that off, and then we sort of caught my mistake. Randall Cunningham is the 17th. Richmond Webb is the 18th. Tied with Lomas Brown, so I mean 18th, but for purposes here, we'll say Lomas Brown entered as our 19th. Tom Nalen, number 20. So there you go, that worked. Kevin Williams, number 21. Pat Swilling, number 22.
Felt pretty good about that, not going to lie.
No, as you should. Henry Ellard, number 23. Steve Wisniewski, 24. And the Peanut squeaks in at number 25.
Yeah, we thought that he was out because we miscounted.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, but he ended up. I think had we known that we were off by one, I think we probably should have revoted for that last spot because there's a gap between Wisniewski and Tillman, and Tillman only has one more vote than 2 other guys. I think it might have made sense for us just to go through that again and have one more thing since. We had Tillman number 1. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have 2 guys who just missed out were Donovan McNabb and Neil Smith. They're the 2 people right behind him. I thought it might have made some sense just to go and vote that again had we realized it. But there's a bigger gap between Wisniewski and Tillman than there was between Tillman.
No, very, very true.
And like you said, this is the first time we're doing it, and we're learning as we go here, which is why we didn't videotape it or record what we did.
Right.
But I don't necessarily think Tillman's going to get through to the top 15 of our group anyway, so I'm not really that upset about it.
And nor do I think he's going to get into the top 25 of the other one. So we also so we also did the last few out just those just missing the cut: Reuben Brown, Donovan McNabb, Neil Smith, and Jeff Saturday.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There was Reuben Brown as well, and Jeff Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, and it looks like I think we all want to do this again. Hopefully, we're going to have a few extra people and
Ricky Waters, right? Was he 30th?
Yes, Ricky Waters is 30th. So he's the last. We did the last 5 out.
Last 5 out were Reuben Brown, Don McNabb, Neil Smith, Jeff Stein, and Ricky Waters. Sorry, go ahead.
So Sam Mills fell out completely. But that's okay. We'll be talking about him again, I have a feeling.
Yeah, Sam Mills and Bryant Young, who were finalists last year, both only got one vote and didn't get out. Heinz Ward also only got one vote.
Yeah.
And then the two people shut out were Eric Allen and Clay Matthews.
Thing, though, too, I mean, we know we're going to be talking about Bryant Young again and Sam Mills again for sure, because nobody's ever been a finalist and then fallen out of the semifinals. I don't think. I'm pretty sure I'm right on that.
I can't imagine. Well, the semifinalists have only really haven't been around for that long.
Right.
I'd be very surprised if that happened. So.
Mm-hmm. So what's up next? Once they announced I hate to say the actual. I feel like we did this. You know, I don't even want to say once they announced the actual ones. I'll tell you this: we will tell you more about our process than they will.
That is true.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely will.
And I think we care a lot more, this group. I really believe that. Of course, Vinny cares enough for all of us.
That is also true.
Yes. So after they sort of announced, I guess, the real semifinalists, we're going to do this again. Hopefully we'll add a few other people who were not able to attend. And might be some other people who are listening and just want to be a part of it. And we'd love to have you. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was really good. It was very educational. It was a really good discussion. When we do this the next time, are we going to do both our top 25 to 15 and their top 25 to 15?
Yeah, well, basically, I think we'll start off by comparing what they had, where everything sort of differed, because I think we should put that in context, because that will sort of reflect, I think, where a lot of us are coming from. And also, too, I think if we add other people, and hopefully, like Vance will be able to be a part of that, and Paul, to people who had their initial votes but weren't able to be part of that conversation, I certainly would have loved to have heard from those two, because that could have easily changed this 25 very much so.
Yep, agreed. I mean, the fact that Nolan and Williams and Tillman were three people who got. I mean, Williams got 2 votes. Nolan and Peanut got 1 vote. Peanut wasn't even on our original list until Jack's votes came in, like, right before we did this.
That's true, too.
And he still ended up in the top 25. Yeah, you never know exactly what he could have told us about. I don't know. I mean, I'll just pick on Bengals folks. What he could have told us about Willie Anderson that may have made a difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or Corey Dillon, or I don't know. Well, he didn't have to KO Spikes, but I'm just trying to think of people who played for the Bengals. Because we always say, every team says the the Pro Football Hall of Fame hates them. The only team that's right is the Bengals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's true. Well, something like you talk about how baseball hates itself. Cincinnati, Vance and I, when we were talking, like, retire some of these numbers.
Yeah.
That's sort of like that's one of the bigger reasons why you were happy that Richard Seymour got into their franchise Hall of Fame. What does it say about a player when he's eligible for that Hall of Fame and he doesn't get in?
Right, exactly right. And it was also interesting for Patriots fans that we elected Harrison before Seymour. But Seymour is definitely going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame at some point. And I don't think that Harrison's ever going to get there, unfortunately. So.
Every team in every league, in every sport, has a fan favorite that if you're not in part of that fan base, you just don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's Brewski for us. Like, Brewski, when he went to the Patriots Hall of Fame, the other 2 people they nominated that year were like folks they had never thought of before and haven't shown up again. It was Leon Gray, who's a very good offensive lineman who ended up getting in as a senior candidate. I can't remember who the other one was, but it was like 2 other names just because they just knew Brewski was going to get 98% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's interesting. So just so you know, in case anybody's wondering, according to that Hall of Fame metric, out of these folks, if they just took the top 5, do you know who the top 5 would be in the Hall of Fame metrics out of all the folks we have here?
Out of all of them, or just in this core?
No. So of the 25, all of the top people for Hall of Fame metrics made our final 25.
Okay.
If the Hall just took the top 5 of those, you know what the class would be.
Well, it would be Peyton.
Yep.
All right, so I'm not looking at this, so... All right, I don't want to cheat. I want to do this properly. All right, so I'd say Peyton for sure. Calvin wouldn't be on that because he didn't play long enough. So Baselli wouldn't be on that either. John Lynch?
Nope.
Okay. Reggie Wayne?
Yep, Reggie Wayne would be 5th. He's, according to them, the 11th best wide receiver of all time.
Okay. Trying to think, because a lot of this is now longevity. Faneca?
Faneca would be number 2. Okay. He's the 4th best guard of all time, which is why it's ridiculous he's still waiting.
All right, so it wouldn't be Sean Alexander. Rondé had a long career.
Yeah, Rondé's further down. He's the 29th best defensive back.
Okay.
So Lynch is the 40th, by the way, according to these.
Oh, Clay Matthews.
Listings. Yeah, Clay Matthews? No.
No? Okay.
No, not even close. We're going. By the way, you know who's 2 spots above Clay Matthews in the Hall of Fame standings?
Who?
Clay Matthews, his son. I didn't want to bring that up because I didn't need to. But I had that in my back pocket as to the Hall of Fame monitor rankings.
And that's the approximate value, right?
Yeah, it's the approximate value. Yeah.
Okay. And that's total, not per game or anything like that.
No, it's career.
Oh, career. Okay.
Yeah. So let me get this here.
Oh, you know what?
Clay Matthews Jr. is number 34, and Clay Matthews the 3rd, I guess, is number 32. Ken Norton Jr. is between them.
Wait a minute, Clay Matthews wasn't even our 25. Why the hell did I even say that?
I don't know.
Because I'm an idiot. And thanks for letting me sort of slide on that one. You could have gone so many places, and you didn't.
Yeah, I decided to let it go. I just wanted to make fun of Clay. Not make fun of, but just bring up that Clay Matthews' son is ahead of him on the system they have. So, yeah, 2 left. One, both defensive players. So let's see if that'll help here.
Yeah, might. Trying to think who I know it's not. Did I say Charles Woodson yet?
You did not. So Charles Woodson is the 8th best defensive back of all time, according to them. He'd be number 3.
Okay.
And one last one.
Lynch?
Number 4, number 6 play the same position. You already guessed Lynch. Number 4, number 6 play the same position.
Okay. It's not one of those linebackers. Richard Seymour?
It is the linebacker.
Seymour?
It is the linebackers. It's not Seymour. Seymour's would be number 10 on this list.
Swilling?
No, it's one. Nope, it's not Swilling. No, middle linebackers, inside linebackers.
Who the hell am I forgetting?
He's getting 2 of them. One who didn't make the semifinal or make the finalist list last year, and one who made the finalist list for the first time.
It can't be Patrick Willis.
Patrick Willis is 6.
Holy shit! So Zach Thomas is 4.
8. Yeah, Zach Thomas is the 7th best inside linebacker of all time.
Holy crap! Okay.
And Patrick Willis is 8th. So it would be Manning, Faneca, Woodson, Thomas, and Wayne. I told you an average Hall of Fame is 100 on their system. Manning's 258, Faneca's 139.5, Woodson's 125.03, Zach Thomas is 111.75, and Reggie Wayne is 107.01. The only other players over 100, Patrick Willis at 106.63, Troy Holt at 104.27, and Kevin Williams at 103.28. And then Leroy Butler and Richard Seymour are the only folks over 90. Both Leroy Butler's 97.33, Seymour's 96.28, and then Baselli comes next. Baselli, Barber, Johnson, Ellard, Wisniewski are the only ones over 80.
And Walker's 128 with an asterisk.
Right. Yeah, he's way down there. Like I said, the worst person on this list, according to the system, was Alan Rossum. As I told you, the average Hall of Famer is 100. Alan Rossum has a 7.48. According to this ranking, he is the 958th best defensive back in NFL history.
Well, now he's going to play with a chip on his shoulder.
Maybe now. Wait, if he comes back and plays, is Jack O'Donnell going to be upset?
Oh God! Of all the things to get upset about, that was his take.
Yeah, of all the things to be upset about Tony La Russa, that was his problem. Yeah,
that is this whole traditionalism. I mean, that's sort of like why it's hard. It's so hard for younger people to get into baseball.
Yeah, they're making it impossible.
It just survives in spite of itself.
And a lot of people who grew up in baseball and love it. I watched no Red Sox games, which is probably good for my health. But I watched very few baseball games outside the playoffs because I just didn't care. Yeah. I used to live and breathe baseball, and I just why there was basketball on, there was hockey on. Both those sports are more exciting than baseball and promote their players better. And hockey is terrible at promoting their players and still does a better job than baseball.
You know, I'll close off, I think, with because we've hit the 2-hour mark.
Yeah. Hey, it's like doing the picking all over again.
Yeah, exactly. Which now that next week things are going to be so much later because it's daylight savings, so I'm going to be 2 hours ahead of you.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's all right. I got the time. But I'll close off with a sort of a similar thought. With ties up with just what we just said, like when you're a kid or when you're anything, you know when somebody doesn't care, right? So and people ask me all the time, you grew up in Toronto. Why weren't you a Leafs fan? And when I grew up, it was during the Harold, and I know I've told this before, but it's the same principle. The owner, Harold Ballard, was pretty obvious to me, didn't give a shit. He would make dumb decision after dumb decision. Why the hell am I going to support this team? And I'm sure there's a lot of young people thinking, look at the stupid decisions they keep making. Why do I want to watch this sport?
Yep.
You and I were grandfathered in.
You mean because we're old enough to be grandfathers?
Well, yes. Me especially.
Yeah. Well. Anyway, at least we know we did a more transparent job than the Pro Football Hall of Fame does. So
that's very true.
Awesome.
So again, just thanks.
2 hours.
Yes, 2 hours. Yes. So thanks again for all of those who participated in our mock committee. We're going to be doing a lot more of those. Evan, thanks again for being a part of this. 43 episodes and counting, buddy.
Wow. Do we start season 2 in January? Is that how that works?
I'm going to say yes. I mean, I wasn't even thinking about categorizing them as seasons until, I sent the first one to Ted, and he just said season 1, episode 1. Like, okay. I'll run with that. Why not?
Hey, if we make it to January, we'll only be 48 episodes from syndication.
Nice. I got to work on royalties for us.
Yeah. I'll talk to you later, man.
All right, take care. Thank you all so much for listening. Stay safe, everyone, and look for a lot more content from us regularly at Notinhalloffame.com.